The world has moved digital, and with digital world comes cyber threats. The question is, where is our continent in regards to cyber security? What are we doing policy-wise, personal-wise? And what is the future of the cyberspace in terms of security on this particular continent? Well, I will be having a conversation with Saldys Sheriff, who is a managing partner at Africa Risk Managers and Compliance Partners, to help us understand the world of cybersecurity, especially in the context of the African continent. But before we do that, let's take a look at his profile.
Saldys Jusu-Sheriff is a seasoned risk executive with over 22 years risk management, regulatory compliance, financial crime, information security and internal controls experience gained working for major global financial institutions such as Barclays Bank PLC UK, Barclays Africa Group South Africa, Credit Suisse, BNI Mellon, JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank in UK, Europe and Africa. Saldys has held senior executive positions in several continents, including as COO, Group Compliance and Financial Crime, Barclays Africa Group in South Africa, and Director Business Risk Management and Internal Controls, Barclays Corporate Global International Sales in the United Kingdom. Saldys is a founder and managing partner of Africa Risk Management and Compliance Partners, a Pan-African risk management, regulatory compliance and cybersecurity solutions company focused on serving needs of Africa's financial services sector. Saldys was the founder and inaugural chairman of the Barclays Africa Forum, a platform developed to showcase Africa's incredible businesses, innovators and award-winning entrepreneurs to the UK and global banking audience. Saldys Jusu-Sheriff is Sierra Leonean, based in Africa and the UK.
Thank you very much, sir, for making time to talk to us. First of all, help us understand how important is cybersecurity on a global scale of things?
I think cybersecurity is by far the most significant risk that businesses face right across the world today. What we've seen, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on business globally, is a growth in the degree and in the amount of cyber criminality that's taking place across the world. I think the number of cyber attacks in 2020 compared to the previous 5 years, all our industry statistics tell us there's been a massive growth. I think in the African context, we are seeing a significant growth in the number of cyber attacks and in the variety and types of cyber attacks. And it has a significant impact on businesses and the value that has been created in businesses. Value can be lost overnight if customers' data is lost or misused. Value can be lost overnight in the trust that would be lost by customers in the people who provide businesses services to them. Yep. So it's really crucial that we focus in African businesses focus on cybersecurity and on protecting value in their businesses.
Definitely. Actually, that is quite elaborative in regards to the global scale of things and where Africa falls in this equation. Because when we talk of the continent and its role in the global business ecosystem, for example, of which now business is digital, always Africa is said to be behind. So the question is, in the world of cybersecurity, what is the differentiating factor between the lead markets in regards to how they have put themselves cybersecurity wise vis-a-vis Africa as a continent, how we've positioned ourselves in regards to cybersecurity?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think the reality is that the growth in the digital economy is moving at a different pace on the African continent compared to the rest of the world, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere. And even when we move further east into the Far East and into China, we're seeing an even more advanced use of the extension of the digital economy. I think from an Africa perspective, one thing's for sure, we've seen a great leap in terms of the use of mobile technology and mobile data. And we're seeing a significant and exponential growth in the rate of adoption of smartphones and of the digital platform. So although Africa is perhaps not at the same level as other regions like the Far East and the Northern Hemisphere, one thing's for sure: the problems that they're seeing today are the same problems that we will face in Africa in the future as our digital economies and as digital takes over as a preferred form of engagement by our customers.
Definitely. And we've seen in the local ecosystem, for example, in Kenya, when the banks were giving out their strategies, that's just an example of a segment of our economy. Actually, one of the biggest investments when you look at the outlook is in regards to cybersecurity and protecting themselves, especially in the financial world. How weak are our systems? And in regards, from your observation on the continent, how much money is being pumped into cybersecurity?
I think that it's fair to say that African banks are doing their very best to protect their customers and their customers from cyber attacks. Not just the banks, but the mobile network operators and the payment service providers are all doing their very best in that regard. I think the level of investment in cybersecurity right across the African continent really needs to shift away from not just the sort of network security aspect of things and the systems and technology, but also to the education and the engagement. We need to see financial institutions engaging their staff, training their staff better to understand what cybersecurity risk really is, and also their customers. We want to be able to see them engaging and educating their customers, their SME customers, their personal banking customers, and their personal finance services customers about how to stay safe online, how to prevent themselves being the vectors for cyber attacks going forwards.
That's very key. And from a policy perspective, we understand policy is very critical if we are to achieve, faster adoption of, global standards when you talk cybersecurity. Looking at African governments, has there been, policy measures that are put intentionally to make sure that our cybersecurity is well grounded?
I think that's one area of progress that's worthy of discussion. I think the vast majority of countries that we operate in, we're seeing that governments are stepping up to put in place the necessary legislation and regulations to protect consumers from the impact of cyber criminality and from cybercrime. So in many governments across the world, especially those within the Commonwealth, what we're seeing is the implementation of new regulations and new guidance to various business sectors on how they can improve the governance and the standards for cybersecurity management across their businesses.
That's very critical. Policy is key. Now, you've spoken about different types of, cyber threats that are facing our continent. Maybe elaborate for us a little bit. What are some of these threats and what are the measures that you're taking to counter them?
Well, I think what's really important to understand is that the threat landscape from a cybersecurity perspective is a global threat landscape. I think that whatever it is that we're seeing happening from a cybercriminality perspective on one part of the world is very much a precursor and a picture into what could happen elsewhere. So I hear a lot about, when I talk to business leaders on the continent, about the fact that, cyber threats that we're seeing in the Northern Hemisphere that are impacting big brands are not relevant. A lot of people say to me that, well, these aren't relevant to us on the African continent. We do business differently. Our business delivery mechanisms are not as digital. They're different. But, the fact is everybody is online in some way. So the reality is that as long as you're online, as long as you have a network that's connected to the outside world in some way, then your business faces a cyber threat. That's just the reality. And I guess on the question of the types of cyber threats that we face today and their impact, the one key thing that we're seeing increasingly is in the area of ransomware. In fact, we have a webinar that we're running just to talk about the global ransomware threat landscape, and in particular how that impacts Africa. So we saw in the United States ransomware attacks that impacted infrastructure projects or critical infrastructure, I should say. Pipelines, even state governments have been impacted by ransomware attacks across financial institutions. And on the African continent, more recently, we've seen mobile network operators consistently being faced with ransomware attacks, malware attacks that actually stop their systems from operating. So denial of access attacks that mean that colleagues come into the office in the morning and they cannot run their platforms, and businesses are not able to operate. Very often there's a ransom demand that goes with that.
Looking at the impact of failure to invest, properly in a proper cyber security system, how much in the global scale are we losing?
Yeah, I think, again, that's another fantastic question, Noah. I think, it is estimated that, cybersecurity is costing the global economy in 2019 something like $1.9 trillion. But I think what we need to understand when we look at those numbers is that it's really, really difficult to be able to work out what the true number is. One of the things that we know is that cybersecurity has just become a new vector of criminality. So we shouldn't really look at cybersecurity in an abstract context. We should always look at it in the context of broader criminal behavior. We now know, for example, that in the ransomware space, there are organized crime groups that focus just on ransomware as their modus operandi. So for sure, impact figures in excess of 1.5, 1.9, nearly $2 trillion, but clearly much, much more than that. But also, I think that the other part of the impact that's not fully appreciated is, the brand impact of a cyber attack. So, a brand that's a consumer brand where information is key, or consumer information is key. That loss of confidence, that loss of trust in the brand. How do you value that? How do you value the brand diminution when you allow your business to be the impact of a cyber attack? So the value is not just financial. It's not just the financial value that we work out in terms of the losses and so on. It's that sort of inherent value that's lost when a brand is impacted.
Being an industry player, creating a proper foundation of cybersecurity, where does it start? Because, as a country, as an economy, sometimes we say, oh, this can start in our education system, where we introduce, younger people in some of these elements in the education system. So you grow and you progress to have a solid foundation after a while. From your perspective, on the African continent, where can we start solidifying this aspect of cybersecurity?
You've touched on some of the places that we need to start. I think that we need to start with education. In everything that we want to do that involves creating change, you achieve change through awareness and education. So I think the best place to start is in awareness. I think within our own organizations and our institutions, we need to make our colleagues aware of the impact of cybercrime and the impact of the importance of cybersecurity and the impact of poor cybersecurity. So we need to understand the for an organization to be the victim of a cyber attack, somehow there needs to be a gateway into that organization. And many a time, the gateway is via email. Industries research tells us about 90% of successful cyber attacks start with a very simple email, So I think if we educate our colleagues from a business perspective, if we educate our colleagues about how these cyber attacks happen, how it is that they can take action to be able to prevent themselves being the conduit by which a cyber attack occurs within their organization, that will be a really good starting point. And then I guess we need to stop and we need to look at how do we bring awareness to society more generally. Because sometimes when we look at the banking sector that we operating a lot, customers themselves, and this is from a global perspective, a lot of the crime, the cyber crime that we see today is actually through customers being unaware of what the cyber criminals are trying to do. So the customers themselves become victims due to their own lack of knowledge. So financial institutions, governments, we all need to focus on educating the broader population about cybersecurity, about how it manifests, how cybercrime manifests itself, and how they can improve their own personal cybersecurity. As long as you've got a mobile phone, as long as you're connected to the internet, you are at risk of being the victim of some form of cybercrime. And that's one of the core things that our business is here for. We are working with the financial services sector, the health sector, the professional services sector, to help staff understand what cybersecurity is and what they need to do, what steps they need to do to be able to protect the organizations that they work for.
Definitely, they say ignorance is bliss. And the good book says, people perish due to lack of knowledge, and that applies to cybersecurity. Looking at cybersecurity in itself, like your business, it is a business and industry by itself. What are the opportunities of innovation around cybersecurity, and how can African startups take advantage of this space to grow something amazing out of it?
Well, I think that's a really, really interesting question. The threat that we've talked about, the sort of estimated threat from a cybercrime perspective, we said was sort of north of $1.5 trillion in terms of what we're recording. And that's not going to get any less, because the world, and particularly Africa, is becoming more and more digital every day. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, the global pandemic, has led us to understand and led us to see the impact of digitalization. All the things that we used to do in the physical context, we're now doing online. So many of our colleagues that used to travel into the office on a daily basis are now working from home. So the threat of cyber criminality and the importance of cybersecurity is only set to grow on the African continent. So what that means is that from an Africa perspective, there's a huge opportunity for Africans, for young Africans, to get involved in the cybersecurity risk management space. We should see Africa take more of a lead in helping to protect the world from the cybersecurity threat, growing cybersecurity threats that we face. We have a lot of young, highly skilled, highly capable Africans, a lot of them in the computer science sector, who I believe should be turning their attention to the cybersecurity risk management space, to learning more about how to develop cyber protection solutions and cybersecurity solutions that will be applicable right across the world. So, what we have in Africa is we have a young, dynamic, highly intelligent youth sector. And they're capable of doing whatever it is they set their mind to. And I think what we should be encouraging them to set their mind to is coming up with cybersecurity solutions, applying themselves to come up with solutions that will tackle the cybersecurity problems that the world as a whole faces. I think Africa has an opportunity to be a global player from a cybersecurity risk management perspective. And governments and private sectors should be doing a lot more to promote that.
Very critical. And in that sector of which you're operating in, this notion of, the big boys when you talk about the global cybersecurity market. For ARMC, you are doing different. You are Pan-African in nature. How is that impacting? How competitive is that compared to these other multinational players that are coming onto the continent, focusing on the same issue that you are focusing on?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question, Noah, because what we're doing at ARMC is, in our view, quite unique. We're focused really on trying to find African solutions for African problems. I think that because we are a Pan-African organization, because we are dedicated and focused on serving African financial institutions and African businesses, and because a lot of the people who are within our organization have global experience as well as deep Africa experience, we're able to understand our clients' needs better, and we're able to provide solutions that actually make sense and work in an African context. So yes, it's a highly competitive market. Yes, there are big global players, but we believe that when you come to implementing global solutions in Africa, you really need to be able to do that with an African perspective to delivering those solutions. And that's what we do. We're a risk solutions company. We're made up of professionals who are from right across the continent. We're present in Kenya, where we work with the School of Pensions and Retirement Studies, with Dr. Odondu and the School of Pensions and Retirement Studies. So we work in a competitive environment, but in that environment, we believe that there's something unique about what we're doing. Our Africa focus is unique. Our insistence on working with professionals, African professionals and professionals based on the continent, is also unique. So those are some of the advantages that we have, and we're really excited about the opportunity for cybersecurity and for cybersecurity businesses on the continent.
That's very important, because we've seen actually doing sort of understanding your market and what is happening on the ground has been very critical. In Kenya, we saw an influx of some of multinationals, and sometimes you fail to do proper research. You come here, you find everything is different on the ground. So having a company that focuses on what is happening in Africa and offering African solution is very critical. And as we finish off briefly, your projections sort of prophesy for us. What is the future of Africa when you talk matters cybersecurity, briefly?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm not a prophet, that's one thing. But I can try and just give my take based on the conversations that I have with business leaders across the continent and partners across the continent on a regular basis. I mean, I think that one thing's for sure. Africa's digital journey, it's really at the beginning. It's really just started, and it's set to grow. And I think the rate of growth of Africa's digital journey and Africa's digitalization is going to be exponential. So with that growth in digitalization comes a growth in some of the demeritorious behaviors that go with that. So it comes with a growth in cybercrime. It comes with a growth in the need for greater cybersecurity. So as we look forward for the prospects of cybersecurity on the African continent, what we see is a greater need for cybersecurity. What we see is the threat landscape moving from other parts of the world to Africa. We have a lot of experience in the fraud risk management space. And what we've found in the old traditional frauds is that the frauds that occur in the northern hemisphere, in the Far East, in the Middle East, all those frauds eventually come to Africa. Key message that I would share with African business leaders is, just because you're seeing something happening in the United States today or in the Far East today, and you think, well, that threat's not here, as you continue to go digital, just be sure that whatever threat you're seeing there is whatever problem somebody is dealing with there, be prepared to be able to deal with that problem in Africa for impacting your businesses over the next 3 to 5 years. So, my message to African leaders is about, when it comes to cybersecurity, my message to African leaders when it comes to cybersecurity is to really be prepared. Take a long view, take a forward view, educate yourselves as much as possible about the current cybersecurity threat. And don't ignore it. To board members, don't ignore it. Increase your knowledge, your awareness, your understanding of what is going to be one of the biggest risks and the greatest risks that your organization faces. In the short and medium term. So yeah, that's the way that I would sum it up.
Wow, ignore cybersecurity at your own peril. Thank you very much, Saldys Sheriff from ARMC. That is, when you're mentioning an acronym, it becomes quite tricky, sort of a tongue twister. But Africa Risk Managers and Compliance Partners, thank you for that insightful knowledge and digging into the Africa's cybersecurity space. With that said and done, let's take a look at the markets, shall we?